personal record shows that I dissected about 300 human bodies. We dissected people 2 or 3 hours after they had died. Many times when I cut open a body, blood that was still warm oozed out. If someone says this amounted to live dissection, well, I have to acknowledge that it did. But at the same time, we killed them for scientific research. We did it for our country and for research. To save other people's lives.
From all around the world, in our information age, it's become obscenely difficult to know ourselves. We are inundated by data, algorithms, institutions, and orders of authority so vast that they appear natural. We live beneath banners of progress and efficiency, believing if something is systematic, it must be moral. Yet every so often, history opens a door and shows us where these beliefs lead. When reason is worshipped without conscience, when progress divorces itself from empathy, the result is not civilization, but machinery. It was built not in a mythical age, but in the same modernity we still inhabit, the one that prizes measurements, productivity, and specialization. In the 1930s, the Empire of Japan stood as a symbol of transformation, a feudal archipelago reborn as an industrial titan. The West admired its discipline, the Japanese admired their own obedience. Out of that obedience came a man named Shiro Ishii, a doctor of remarkable intelligence and perfect conformity. Ishii believed that nature could be conquered, that disease could be tamed and then deployed like an army. In his mind, germs were soldiers, and he was the general of fate. The military rewarded his behavior. They built him a city of laboratories on the frozen plains of Manchuria and called it a water purification unit. The name was deliberate. Lies, when repeated by uniforms, become policy. Inside those gates, thousands of prisoners were held. Chinese communists, Korean laborers, Russian captives, men and women whose only crime was to exist within reach of an empire convinced that its destiny was divine. Inside the compound's high walls, humans became instruments. The prisoners were stripped of identity and renamed Marutas, or logs. The name was meant to make them less than human, easier to number, easier to destroy. The experiments that followed defied the imagination precisely because they were so methodical. Victims were deliberately infected with plague, anthrax, cholera, and typhus to observe the slow progression of disease. Others were dissected alive, cut open without anesthesia so that doctors could watch organs struggle in motion. Some were frozen solid to study frostbite, their limbs thawed and refrozen until the skin fell away. Others were subjugated to weapons testing, pressure chambers, or forced pregnancies, all in the name of data. Everything was recorded: temperatures, heart rates, decay. Every act of horror was written in the neat handwriting of scientific procedure. There was no chaos, only torture disguised as research, murder disguised as measurement. When the war ended and Japan surrendered, the laboratories were burned and the remaining prisoners executed. Yet the smoke could not hide the truth for long. Fragments of reports, surviving witnesses, and confessions gathered by the Soviets revealed what had really occurred: a systematic use of human beings as experimental material. The horror of Unit 731 is not in its brutality, but its bureaucracy. There was no wild rage, no frenzy of hatred, only procedure. The men and women who worked there wore white coats, not armor. They wrote reports and were rewarded for their behavior. They believed themselves civilized and imperative for moving the state forward. They were doctors, researchers, engineers, products of schools, readers of journals, fluent in the same logic we praise today. Their conditioning defined them. They had simply been programmed to ignore the small voice that says no. When we study Unit 731, we are not studying the past. We are studying the moment the self dies inside the system. Every technician who obeyed an immoral order participated in the funeral of his own conscience. The tragedy is not only what they did to others, but what they allowed to be done to themselves. Obedience is seductive because it promises relief from doubt. To act on your own moral judgment is terrifying. To act on orders is easy and quiets the mind. We imagine the perpetrators as monsters, but they simply were people who discovered that obedience could erase guilt. Always following orders is the oldest lullaby of a frightened soul. Yet obedience, once rewarded, expands, becomes a habit, then a virtue. In the imperial ethos, loyalty was godliness. The emperor's will was divine, and science became its priesthood. Thus, morality was redefined not as doing good, but as serving well. Once that shift occurs, atrocities are no longer violations, they are efficiencies. Every empire believes it is righteous. Every scientist believes he is pursuing knowledge. Together, they can justify anything. The tragedy of Unit 731 is not that evil appeared, but that ordinary virtues, discipline, curiosity, patriotism, were perverted until they produce evil as a byproduct of the soul. Progress is not the enemy of humanity. Progress without soul is. Science itself is neither good nor evil. It is the mirror of intention that holds it. When empathy vanishes, discovery becomes predation. A scalpel that heals can also dissect the living if wielded by a man who sees life as material to be bought and sold. Scientists of Unit 731 claimed they served the future. They infected prisoners with plague and cholera, not because they hated them, but because they believed that knowledge was beyond morality. They told themselves that suffering today would prevent suffering tomorrow. In this way, cruelty became philanthropy. This is the modern heresy. Believe that utility absolves all sin. But what is the value of knowledge stripped from compassion? A mind can store the data, only a soul can interpret it. The men of Unit 731 recorded everything except their own corruption. They charted the body's decay, but ignored their own. And the world allowed it. When the war ended and the fires of Hiroshima cooled, the United States offered these men immunity in exchange for their data. The victors who had condemned the camps of Europe now purchased the notes of Harbin. Justice was postponed for the sake of expedience. Thus, the machinery of forgetting began to hum. Forgetting is not silence, it is collaboration. It is the subtle agreement between the guilty and the comfortable that what was done need not be remembered. In the years that followed, Japan rebuilt. The laboratories became classrooms, the doctors became professors, the textbooks rewritten. Unit 731 became a rumor, a story whispered but rarely taught, the work hidden in archives labeled classified as the world moved on. But what happens to a nation that buries its own conscience? What happens to a species that refuses to learn moral lessons of its own intellect? We grow brilliant, yet hollow. We innovate faster than we can reflect. We engineer miracles while our empathy rusts. The danger of forgetting is not merely that we might repeat the past, but that we are already repeating it. When algorithms exploit human weakness for profit, when government sacrifices individuals for data, when we call cruelty policy, we are walking the same corridor. The machinery is sleeker now, but the gears all turn the same. Stand now in front of a glowing screen, and you will see the reflection of the same machinery. It no longer wears a uniform or salutes an emperor, but it still asks for obedience. It tells us to believe the numbers, to follow the metrics, to obey the data. It whispers that efficiency is morality and doubt is waste. But doubt is truth. Doubt is the last defense of the self. When we feel that twinge of unease, we must listen. For if we do not, we too will become logs in someone else's experiment. We often imagine that progress has immunized us from barbarism. We point to medicine, law, democracy, and tell ourselves we are better now. But every mechanism that produced Unit 731 still exists. Ambition without empathy, obedience without conscience, knowledge without wisdom. Tools have changed, the instincts have not. Civilization does not collapse when cities burn. It collapses when individuals stop listening to their souls. To study Unit 731 is to study the fragility of goodness. It is to realize that intelligence is not virtue, and that culture does not prevent cruelty. The men who froze prisoners alive also tucked their children into bed. The same hands that wrote reports on plague casualties also played piano. Humanity is not a guarantee of morality. It is the material from which both saints and monsters are made. So we must choose daily to remain awake. Speak truth when silence is rewarded. Feel empathy when detachment is fashionable. Embrace your humanity because that is all that you have. Self-reliance is not isolation. It is discipline. It is a recognition that morality cannot be outsourced. Not to state, not to party, not to faith. The moment we delegate our judgment, the machinery begins to hum again. Perhaps the most dangerous myth is that evil is extraordinary. The truth is opposite. Evil is ordinary. It grows wherever conscience falls silent. Unit 731 was not the eruption of madness, but the perfection of conformity. It was a system that replaced the living souls with a set of procedures and called it progress. And so the task remains to us to not merely to remember the dead, but to remember ourselves. In every age, the world demands that we surrender our inner law to external authority. In every age, it promises safety in exchange for silence. The only defense is self-reliance, not selfishness, not arrogance, but the faith that one's own moral perception, however faint, is sacred. The antidote is awareness, to listen when the heart whispers dissent, to refuse when the system commands harm, to remember that conscience is older than any institution and wiser than any data set. We live now amid new laboratories, new hierarchies, new justifications. The machinery hums more quietly, but it still hums. To live ethically in such a world is to be perpetually awake, to refuse the narcotic of obedience and sharpen the sword of intuition, and to remember what others tried to erase. Because the true experiment of Unit 731 was not upon the bodies of its victims, but upon the soul of humanity. And the experiment has not yet ended. It continues quietly with the hum of the machine.